This is evolution simulation game The Sapling, my solo indie game project. It lets you design your own plants and animals, put them in an ecosystem together and see how they evolve. This is the 5th video in a series of 6 weekly devlogs to show you the upcoming Fight and Flight update. When I first put this game in front of playtesters, they hated it. I'm not exaggerating. Some got confused, some got bored, some got frustrated, and in most cases, all of that simultaneously. Ever since these first playtesting sessions, I have been painstakingly fine-tuning the game's difficulty and clarity, making sure that each new milestone increases the complexity just enough to stay interesting, but not too much to become frustrating. The Fight and Flight update introduces a whole host of new features, and with that obviously comes new complexity that needs to be introduced to the player gradually again. To teach the player about the interaction between temperature and animals, I have come up with this new scenario. It starts off with a normal temperature, but then gets warmer and warmer over time, forcing the player to work towards body parts that can help their creations lose heat again. Simultaneously, I use this scenario to introduce the predator-prey relation. The milestones let the player add senses, then instincts to use that senses, and then a carnivore to use that instinct. A body part that could be really helpful for both the interaction between animals and temperature and the interaction between predators and prey is this one. It is a beak, so the animals don't need to spend a lot of time being vulnerable in their eggs, but it is also really large, which is helpful for losing heat, just like with large beaks in real life. Modeling this scenario was quite a relief after months and months of modeling small body parts with teeth and nails. It's also the first one without water, which might be why it looks a bit unusual. The second new scenario, called the Ice Age, is more or less the opposite. Instead of warmer, it gets colder over time. This leads to an ice bridge after a millennium or so, blending the ecosystems on the 3 islands, just like what happened when a land bridge emerged between North and South America and caused the Great American Interchange of animal species about 3 million years ago. The goal for the player is to create an ecosystem on this island that survives even after the sea is frozen and species from the other islands come over to yours. While this may sound all fine in theory, in practice this coming over was quite hard to realize. This is because the animals had little reason to cross the ice, and even if they tried, they often died from the lack of food during their journey. To fix this, I needed animals that could reach new food quickly. Gliding animals might seem obvious, but to be able to glide, an animal of course needs to be lightweight. But remember, this scenario is called the Ice Age, so I also needed the animal to be able to survive the cold, for which getting fat and furry is a good solution. I had to tweak some numbers in the simulation to make it possible to design an animal that strikes a perfect balance between the two. Lightweight enough to glide, but fat enough to not freeze when the temperature gets too cold. To make sure they not only could leave their island but also wanted to, I have made them really interested in eggs, which they don't lay themselves. With this scenario, I fill a gap that I've wanted to fill for a long time, letting players separate and blend ecosystems again, also called allopatry and sympatry. To expand on this idea some more in the sandbox, I have also added the option to change environment statistics like the amount of wind and groundwater. This way I can, for example, split an ecosystem by adding a really dry line in the middle. Temperature is something that players could already play with for the world as a whole, so you can cause global warming or global cooling, but now it is also possible to make things as you want them on a smaller scale. Giving the player the flexibility to change the temperature as they please clashed a bit with another thing I wanted, which is to make the main lake in the sandbox freezable, just like the sea in the Ice Age level. But as players now have the option to add multiple hot and cold areas really close to each other around the lake, at what point do I actually freeze the lake? After some experimentation, I have chosen an approach that samples various locations around the lake and averages the temperatures. The lake freezes when that temperature is below a threshold. Being able to split and merge ecosystems is of course only fun for the player if you can really explore the effects of your actions. To make this possible, I also implemented another often requested feature, a family tree. For each species, you can now see from what other ancestor species it evolved and to what child species it gave rise. I've personally already lost many hours using the family tree in sandbox mode with random mutations turned on. For example, trying to identify the last common ancestor for 2 species, or trying to figure out in what ancestor a particular successful body part first emerged. I hope you will enjoy this feature as much as I do. And that brings me back to the frustration of the early playtesters. At the time I chose not to release the game before playtesters showed excitement. This was a very uncertain time in the development because I was unsure if it was even possible to ever get there with this game concept. But then something special happened. I was fixing a bug, got sidetracked, and by accident lost an hour actually playing the game. While moments like these are terrible planning wise, they are actually a really good sign, because I noticed that the more often this happens to me, the more often I get excited reactions from playtesters as well. I believe that scenarios like the greenhouse and the ice age are incredibly important for the player experience, mainly because they take away important causes for frustration. But smaller features like a family view, which I add on the side and then get lost in for hours, might be just as important as well. If this video made you want to try the game, you can. It is currently available in early access on Steam and itch. See the links below for more information. Keep in mind though that what you just saw in this video will be part of the next big update, which is currently planned for June 15. If you want to follow development, there is a Twitter and a newsletter. And you might also be interested in other videos on this channel, like the one where I run the simulation for 7 days straight, or the trailer for the previous flower update.